Welcome to Heresy, the Horus Heresy talk show. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Alpha Legion, the 20th Legion, the Masters of Lies and Obfuscation. I'm your host, Alpharius, or am I? We're going to be talking about the Legion trait and the advanced reaction, the Warlord traits, and also the armory and unique consul that the Alpha Legion have available to them in Horus Heresy, the Age of Darkness. But before we do that, if you enjoy the content, please do leave me a like and subscribe. And if you've got any feedback or comments at all, please drop them down in the comments below. And now on with the show. So first of all, the Alpha Legion trait is called Lies and Obfuscation. Pretty simple and effective name there, giving you a bit of an idea of what the Alpha Legion are all about. So this means that the model is considered 2 inches further away whenever you're doing stuff to it, which affects an awful lot of things. It's deceptively very powerful. I've seen lots of people play this incorrectly, so you don't take 2-inch range off your weapons when you're shooting at something with this. The model counts as being 2 inches further away, which means for things like Melter or for things like Rapid Fire, you lose 2 inches off the half distance. So in order to use a Melter gun on an Alpha Legion vehicle with armor bane, you've got to be within 4 inches. To rapid fire a bolter at an Alpha Legion Marine, you've got to be within 10 inches. It's really, really good. And you will see when you play against Alpha Legion, if you've not, I've played against Alpha Legion quite a few times now, this becomes relevant a lot in a lot of turns. And it may seem at first glance that this is not going to come up so often. And you know what? If you're shooting at a las cannon at Alpha Legion, it probably doesn't come up much, in a given turn. But most of the powerful weapons and things in the game are short or shorter range. Now you think about rapid fire, armor bane, melter, grav weapons, getting into melee. All these things require you to be close, and adding 2 to all those ranges makes a really big difference. Particularly if your opponent, if you are an Alpha Legion player, is a bit less knowledgeable, this can often catch them out quite a lot. So, people will move up to within 6 for a melter gun, go to shoot you and realise they're out of range. So, you've got a choice of where you can play that. You can remind your opponents politely, help your opponents not to forget when they have got the options to get into range. Or, if you play a little bit more seriously, it's going to come up even more as people, make mistakes, forget about the Alpha Legion trait and that kind of stuff, what's going on. So really up to you how you play that. But either way, however you play it, it comes up a lot. I found when playing my army, which has got a lot of things in it that are 18-inch range weapons, that very often I'm just out of range to shoot something. Quite simply, I'm just out of range to shoot at an Alpha Legion model with some of those guns or grav weapons, which I got a range of 12. I'm just out of range to shoot things when I would have been in range against another Legion. It's very, very good. And even on weapons with 24-inch ranges, you will see that this does come up, quite a lot as well. It's really relevant. It does have that magnified effect versus short range things, but it can come up quite a lot. Charges is where it's particularly good, because charges, you're only rolling 2d6, and needing to effectively roll 2 higher on every charge roll you ever make can really, really make a big difference. And as an Alpha Legion player who isn't necessarily specialised into getting into melee, or you want to keep your opponent's melee units away, it's a really powerful tool for doing that, especially when you combine it with your own movement reactions. So if you imagine an enemy unit runs up to one of your Marine units 1 inch away, ready to charge you, you do a movement reaction, so you move 4 inches away. And then when they charge, you count as being 2 more away. So now all of a sudden they're needing to roll a 7 to get into combat, whereas before they were basically auto-charging you in combat. Now add a couple of extra inches to that. Let's say they didn't get to within 1. Let's say they were in 4 of you, which meant they were almost certainly going to pass their charge. Then you move react, so you're 8. Add this on, now you're 10. Now it's almost very likely that they're going to fail their charge. It's such a big difference when it comes into play. It's very good when you combo with other things that change ranges, like Shroud Bombs. So if you've played against any Recon units or Exodus in Alpha Legion, they've got Shroud Bombs as well. So they're 8 inches further away when you're trying to shoot at them. And all of a sudden, even medium range guns struggle to get into range to shoot these things, and at least certainly can't get in range of rapid fire and that kind of stuff. Or things like difficult terrain. If someone's having to charge you through difficult terrain, or maybe a grav template, they're taking 2 inches off their charge distance, then they're adding another 2 on for your model being, another 2 inches further away. All this is stacking up to just protect your models. You do need to get used to measuring things a lot, because you've got to play this, and you've got to play for these extra 2s to make a difference. And to do that, you have to measure a lot of ranges and check you're putting units in the right places. Not everyone plays like that, and I imagine not every Alpha Legion player is going to want to play like that. But to get the most out of your Legion trait, that's just what you do. And I would advise getting used to doing that. Doesn't have to slow your game down or make it too gamey. It's just part of the way your Legion works. Really, this incentivizes you to keep distance. Not a long distance, but it definitely incentivizes you to make your opponent roll for every roll, fail the odd charge, be out of range for the odd shot throughout the game, and it all stacks up as the game goes on, the number of times your opponent doesn't quite get to do what they want, which is a very Alpha Legion thing. Now, Alpha Legion are unique in the fact they've got 2 separate abilities, so their other Legion trait is called the Rewards of Treachery. What this lets you do is use a unique unit from any other Legion and count it as being Alpha Legion, so you pretty much get to stick any unique unit in your army as if it was your own unique unit. Alpha Legion are actually better at using some Legions' unique units than the Legions themselves are, in a weird way, because their other Legion trait is so good, and because some of the other things they've got access to are so good, they actually get more value out of them, which is quite funny. There's lots of fun and interesting ways to convert, model, or paint a whole variety of different things to make this work. I've seen really cool conversions of other units from other armies like Fire Drakes, but instead of dragon scales, they've got the sort of lizard scales on their shields to make them a bit more Alpha Legion, for example. There's loads of cool opportunities with this, and whilst this ability sort of verges a little bit on allies territory for me, which is not something I particularly like, it is great for the opportunities of what it lets you do. And obviously you can pick things that are cool, you can pick things that are fun. If you just want to own a different unit for the sake of collecting it, but paint it in the same colours as your Alpha Legion so you can actually use it, that's great as well. But if what you do want to do is pick some of the best units in the game for this, there's a little list here that I've put together of some things you should definitely consider. Inner Circle Knights Cenobium, Dreadwing Interemptors, Invictus Suzerains from Ultramarines, Fire Drakes, Dawnbreaker Cohort, Marigal Dreadnoughts, and Rampager Squads are probably some of the top units that I would be considering to fill out a role in my Alpha Legion army. Of course, there's lots more out there, and if you do use the PDF unit, you've also got things like Sunkiller Squads or Iron Havocs as well. There's just so many different ways you can use this and get a little something extra into your Alpha Legion army. Their advanced reaction is called Smoke and Mirrors. What it does is it moves one model 12 inches when you get shot. Moves one model 12 inches, puts the rest of the unit over with that model, and then they scatter 1 inch. They scatter 1d6 inches after landing. Now, because it's only d6 inches, if they hit a piece of terrain that you've moved them behind to try to avoid the shooting attack that's triggering this, a lot of the time they're going to just stop because the unit won't go far enough to scatter through it. If you put them behind a rhino or something, they're probably going to stop. They're going to be mostly safe. If you're a little bit lucky, the unit shooting you will just lose its entire shot, which is great. But even if you do scatter a little bit out of the cover that you've hidden behind, you will probably not scatter your whole unit out of cover, and you might just reduce the effect of that incoming shooting attack. But that's not the only way to use this. That's the simple, basic level 1 way to use this. It's also really good if you've got it and you've not used it. A unit comes towards your Alpha Legion unit wanting to charge it. They can't afford to shoot you really before they charge, because what might happen is you might use this when they shoot you, move 12 inch further away, and now all of a sudden they can't charge you either, and they're left sort of standing in the middle of the board, and you've got the opportunity to shoot them next turn. You can also use this to leap your units forward. There's nothing that says you have to go into cover or backwards when you're getting shot at with this. You could have your opponent shoot you, and you could then decide to move that unit forwards to nearer the enemy lines, hopefully behind cover from the unit shooting it as well at the same time. And then next turn, all of a sudden, you've got a unit in your enemy's backlines wreaking havoc. So many ways to use this. It's really great defensively, but it also, as well as potentially cancelling or mitigating a shot, it also lets you move a really long distance, 12 inches, plus maybe the scatter comes in your favour as well. A really long distance where a unit all of a sudden out of nowhere, and it's just so good. I think this is possibly the best reaction in the game. And if it isn't, it's certainly up there. You certainly would put this up with the other best reactions in the game for, if you were discussing, trying to figure out which one you think is the best. And I think this is a really cool and thematic way of representing the Alpha Legion, Smoke and Mirrors, Lies and Obfuscation theme as well. So on to the Warlord Traits. So firstly, they've got the Mobius configuration, which is loyalist only. It basically lets you be brothers with anybody that you want to ally with. So your standard allies, no bonuses, no negatives. You get an extra VP if all the units in the allied detachment die, and your opponent scores no VP for killing them. You also get your first reaction every turn free in your primary detachment, which is pretty good as Warlord traits go. It's a bit strange this, but things that do affect victory points scoring can be relatively broken in some games sometimes, and if you abuse this, like for example, taking a little bit of Alpha Legion and a lot of an allied detachment so your opponents can't score victory points off most of your army, this could be fairly unfun to play against. So obviously that's not the ideal use of this. The ideal use is to take something fairly reasonable as an allied detachment, and it doesn't give away any VP and actually gives you one as well. So interest in this if you're going to play Loyalist Alpha Legion. Certainly something you want to give a try. Just don't use it unfairly. Master of Lies is the second one. So this is a very Alpha Legion thematic Warlord trait as well. So at the start of the game, once all deployment's been done, you get to redeploy 3 units, including putting those units into reserves. You can't take them out of reserves, like some similar traits, but you can put them in. Really good for making your opponent deploy some more static units disadvantageously, potentially. So if your opponent is deploying second after you, maybe he puts a heavy support squad where it can see one of your squads for turn 1. Maybe he deploys a tank like a Predator in cover or something so it can see one of your units. Your opponent will always deploy to try and give himself fire lines when shooting at your stuff. And if they do that and you then take the units off the board that they were shooting at, or at least the optimal units for them to shoot at off the board, or just move them somewhere else on the board, you've gained yourself an advantage, particularly against static units, but against any units really. You can refuse a flank, you can deploy a bunch of stuff on one flank, your opponent will deploy some stuff to counter it, you move it to the other flank and maybe overwhelm that flank. There's lots of things you can do with traits like this. Gives you a movement phase reaction, which I do quite like in Alpha Legion because of the interaction with the Legion trait. Still not the reaction I would choose, but better than it is in some other legions. And the third Warlord trait is Hydronex Cursor. So start of the battle, you pick a Space Marine Legion faction, and until the end of the battle, the Warlord and the unit he joins get +1 to hit versus anything of that faction, and it's got a shooting phase reaction. So really good buff, really good reaction. The only problem with this is right now it works every game because you pick at the start of the game, but it's got to be a Legion faction. In the future, when there's more factions, you come up against someone who's not a Space Marine Legion, this basically does nothing other than give you a shooting phase reaction. Now, if you are looking for a shooting phase reaction in your army, I would probably still take this anyway because it will work a lot of the time, but it is a limitation worth being aware of. So on to the weapons for Alpha Legion. So firstly, we've got the Power Dagger. So this is a Strength 3, AP 3, Breaching 5, Sudden Strike 1 dagger, which is quite a lot of rules for a little stabby dagger. It's good that it has AP 3, which is quite cool, but only Strength 3, so pretty much against Space Marines, it's only ever going to wound them on a 5. On the flip side, that does mean that if you're fighting against something with a 2+ save, anytime you wound them, you are also going to breach and go through that armor. So pretty cool. These, and getting the sudden strike when you do get the charge is also good. It means you'll be striking first against most Space Marines. The question I have to ask about this is, do you really want to be fighting an enemy unit with a 2+ save, which will also therefore normally have multiple wounds per model as well, that you're wounded on a 5 with this weapon? And, I think the answer is probably no. You probably don't want to be doing that. So there's quite a few guys in the Alpha Legion list, and there's some units in the Alpha Legion list where you get these for free, and that's fine. I don't think you really want to be paying points for them most of the time. I know there was a point last edition where these were specialist weapons, so you used to take them with a Power Fist for +1 attack, but you can't do that anymore for anyone who's not noticed. But I do think these are best left to where they are free, and they're cool when they're free, but probably not worth spending your points on, unless you really want that for the cool factor of having these Alpha Legion Legionnaires with the daggers. Bane Strike Bolters, much like the Sons of Horus, Alpha Legion get access to these, so they're quite powerful. Strength 5, Breach and 6, but they are short ranged at 18 inches. You really want to get within 9 inches for the rapid fire to see these shine. They're pretty good at killing Marines. Obviously, they wound on a 3, and on a 6 they also breach. They're also decent at knocking wounds off Dreadnoughts and Elite Infantry as well, just because of the volume of fire they put out, but generally if you've got these, being within 9 inches of Dreadnoughts or Elite Infantry, maybe not so much of a good idea. You sort of want to be getting in there and making sure whatever you shoot is dead, otherwise it's probably going to be you next turn. For Seekers who can also take these, a question I see quite a lot is, what is better, the Kraken round on the existing bolters or Bane Strike? Well, the Kraken round is probably overall better. To 24-inch range, one shot, it breaches on a 4+, so you're probably better taking Kraken rounds generally. That said, Seekers do quite a lot more damage at 9 inches to your average Space Marine unit, almost a third more, or just over a third more actually when I did the maths on this. So even though they breach less, they just do so many more wounds because of the double shots at 9 inches. So I don't think it's beyond imagining that you always just keep the Kraken rounds on your Seekers. You certainly could take these, but you might want to mix and match them in the army, or just take the one you think has got the better model. And lastly, in a little bit of a light armoury section really for the Alpha Legion, we've got Venom Spheres. So these are 6 attacks at an 8-inch range, 1 use, assault, and they're poison 3+. So for 10 points each, I wouldn't be buying these on characters. It's way too many points for a one-shot weapon that doesn't penetrate any armour. But on the units that do get them, for example, the squad leaders in some of the units or some of the special characters that get them, they are pretty decent. You just throw them at the first thing that charges you when you overwatch, or if you're shooting something at close range, you throw the Venom Sphere, and it does do a little bit more damage on average than most other weapon options that you would generally have. And then we got the Saboteur. So the Saboteur is a unique Consul upgrade for Alpha Legion. So for 15 points, he gains Scout, Infiltrate, Melter Bombs, Breacher Charges, and Shroud Bombs, and also gets the option to take a Nemesis Bolter as well. That's a lot of stuff for 15 points, and a Consul has got obviously very good stats to start with as well. What he gets that's special is a rule called False Colours. That means he can't be attacked until he's shot or charged something, which is cool. The enemy don't know he's Alpha Legion, basically. So you can infiltrate him. The enemy can't fire Overwatch or return fire at him the first time he does something because of the way the rules are written. So Overwatch, he can't be shot at until he's performed a successful charge. So the first time he charges, he can't be overwatched. He can't be shot at until he's performed a successful shot. This is slightly less clear in the rules, but I also think he can't be returned fire at either on the first shot, and that's really good. So he can potentially infiltrate. He can't charge turn 1 because he's an infiltrator, but on turn 2, turn 1 he can wander up the board from his infiltrating position. Turn 2, he can just charge something, and there's nothing your opponent can do about it, bar maybe trying to block his path with a Rhino or something like that. So potentially this guy could be charging with no Overwatch into a unit of heavy support squad on turn 2. And because he's a Consul, he's not going to kill that unit in one go, but he may very well break them, and if not, he certainly locks them up and means that they can't shoot, which is a really good thing to have access to. Alternatively, he comes with Melter Bombs, and he can just charge an enemy tank and Melter Bomb it, which is not a bad thing. There's a good chance of just blowing up an enemy tank, and for 75 points, even if he does that and then immediately dies, or if he charges the enemy heavy support squad I've just mentioned and then he immediately dies, he's going to make his 75 points probably plus the cost of a power weapon back without any issues. Pretty much he can charge into any unit because he's a Consul. He can charge into any enemy unit, and he'll generally win the fight unless that unit is an assault unit, which you're obviously going to avoid, or have got their own character in it. And in being in that combat, he also protects himself from being shot as well, which is the biggest thing that will generally kill a lone character. He can also be a Terminator. Nothing in his rules stop him being a Terminator as well, if you want to make him a bit tougher. And the alternative way to use him again is actually just to add him to an Infiltrator or Scout unit. So in that case, his False Colours doesn't do anything because he has to be on his own for that to work. But if you do want to get a character into one of your Headhunter units or something like that, for 75 points, you've got an infiltrating character with them, which significantly increases the power of the unit and its ability to, go into melee or do something. And you can also just leave the unit, in which case he gets the benefits of his false colours as well. So really, really good option, the Saboteur. I could certainly see taking multiple of these, potentially even in an army, and giving your opponent some really interesting things to need to deal with, which again are very Alpha Legion. So in summary, the Alpha Legion rules are quite unusual, but very thematic. It's a very good Legion trait that requires good play for you to capitalise on, but does really, really impact the battlefield. And if you look at the Alpha Legion trait and think it's maybe not that good, I promise you from playing against it a lot, it's very, very good. You also get access to a unit from any other Legion, which can be very thematic, give you lots of cool modelling options. It can be very powerful, or it can just be very cool, depending on the unit you decide to bring. They're in the running for the best advanced reaction in the game, certainly, although their armoury is mediocre to bad. Really, the options they've got in there aren't very good, but the Saboteur is very thematic and also very powerful, potentially, at the same time as well. And I think, overall, that sums up Alpha Legion. The very thematic set of rules. They've really gone out their way to try and represent Alpha Legion with something other than just, extra shooting bonuses or melee bonuses or something like that. They've given them this really cool set of rules that represent their lies and obfuscation, which are quite powerful, but also fun in the way you use them, and they play very differently to any other Legion. That's the end of the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening. If you would like to leave me a comment or any feedback, please do, and please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe on YouTube as well. See you soon. Bye-bye.